And so the argument is that any time that the poskim in the medieval period were discussing allowing a teacher, like in the Ramah and the Shach and the Ritva, they were talking about allowing a teacher to resign. It was talking about a private teacher teaching one or two students. But if he's hired by the public, how can we allow him to go back on that? So that's what we were up to. He says, Ve'efshar, the kaven de hamenahel shel Talmud Torah socher samalamed ba'atzmo. It's possible that since the principal did a unilateral hire without consulting the rest of the community. In other words, the principal is a singular entity, even though he represents the community school, but nonetheless, he's the one who's doing the hiring. The teacher is not hired by a panel. It's a private hire. That's not considered to be as if the public hired him. However, I refer you to Hagos Rabbi Akiva Eger on the Shulchan Aruch, Shekasav din ze v'hosif ta'afilu yachid shesachar samalabed al das rabim. He says explicitly that even if an individual hires someone like a teacher for the community, gam ze nechshav kerabim shesachra, then it's as if the public hired him directly. I'm sorry, just some residual something in my throat. And therefore, it's as if the community hired him. Ve'ein hamalamed yachol lachzor bo, and therefore the teacher is not allowed to resign. V'im kein lechora menahel Talmud Torah shesachar malamed have al das uletzarach rabim v'lo yichol malamed lachzor bo. So according to Rabbi Akiva Eger, if a teacher is hired for a community school, then even if he's hired by the principal individually, he can't resign. Amna mitachin sheish lechalek to b'chiyah gavna shirak hamanal socher samalabed al das atzmo ein zenech shav sheniskar al das rabim. But you could still make a distinction that if the principal hired him not in consultation with others, but did it independently because he was vested with that right, then that's still called a private hire. And there's further room for deliberation because it's altogether possible that he is coming with the force of the community, and therefore, even if there's no explicit contract, it's as if there's a kinyan was made. Hamachaber shlita le'el b'shem hashach shamalamed b'nidon didon yachol lachzer bo afsha asu kinyan im kein efsher sheyachol lachzer bo afim ze nechshav karabim shesachruhu b'tzarachiyan bazeh. But it still could be that according to the shach, he would have the right to resign, even if there's a contract in place based on the fact that he was hired by the public. And so we don't have closure on this. We're going to do one more point, and then we're going to finish this tshuva. He says, so Rav Shraga continues, he says, Akati pashka ban livurei im b'malamed shayach kili b'nei Yisrael avadim v'lo avadim avadim. So we still have yet to clarify if there still remains this concept that a teacher cannot be compelled to work because of the principle that the Jewish people are not allowed to be enslaved. And he writes, Kosov hachavos yoyer, shebeschirus malamed shaykh lomar avodayhem v'lo avadim la avadim. The Chavos Yoyer, who lives in the, I believe, 17th century, he writes that when you're hiring a teacher, you can say that you cannot coerce them to work because God says the Jewish people are my servants. You cannot compel them to be servants to human beings. Even though the work that he's doing is holy work. And therefore, there's a counter argument that if he's doing holy work on behalf of our children, you have to compel him to remain in his post. Kevin shekol atam shemekabel schar umishum shemore uposek ta'amim v'zeh eino avdus Hashem ayin sham. The argument being is that as a person doing holy work, he's not doing an act of servitude. He's teaching Torah. And as a teacher of Torah, that's not considered to be servitude, that's considered to be a privilege. Umashma midvar of demisha avodaso avodas kodesh. And therefore, anyone who's doing holy work, lo ne'amar alav hadin sheyachol lachzor bo be'emtza avodaso. According to the Chavos Yoyer, we would not allow such a person to quit in the middle of a job, because the whole basis for allowing a person to quit in the middle of the job is because of the Torah's aversion to slavery. But this person's work is not servitude, it's not slavery, it's the privilege of teaching Torah. And therefore, maybe the argument can be made that a Torah teacher is not allowed to resign mid-job or mid-term because he's teaching Torah. Amnam haktzos hachoshen kasav al dvarav, ulanias daiti lo nehira dvarav bazeh. But the Ketzos takes issue with the Chavos Yoyer, and he says, I don't understand what his point. Demasha kasav deposek ta'amim einon mitzvahs Hashem va'avodaso, chalila lomar de'in ze avodaso yisbarach. Dehachasinon b'nedarim l'rav d'sfir le'da'asr likach schar pisuk ta'amim v'hu bichlal ma'ani b'chinam. He says that the Chavos Yoyer talks about a person who just merely teaches the children where to end the pesukim, where to end the psukim. He says that's not considered teaching Torah. That's not considered to be serving Hashem. He says, but that doesn't make sense because the Gemara says explicitly that a person who does that, who puts the periods at the end of the sentences in the Torah, is not allowed to take compensation because he's doing Torah study. Because of Sham Haran, the Spira Le Larav de Havi de Oraisa, El Adaanan Kaimalan Karebi Yochanan de Shari Schar Pisuk Ta'amim, Mishum de Spira Le de Pisuk Ta'amim Enom de Oraisa, Elam de Rabbanan, V'chein Kos of Sham Harash. However, there are those who say that you could take compensation because that's not considered to be a biblical form of Torah teaching, but only a rabbinic form. V'imkein lo gara mitfila umuchach mized de malamed chozer. Dafol gabdehu osa abdus Hashem, eved Hashem mikri, avol mashen iskasher la'acherim eno eved shelahem v'yochol lachzer bo ad kan devarav. He says, the Ketzos wants to argue as follows. He says that based on that, a teacher can quit midterm because even though he's doing God's work, and therefore he's called Hashem's slave. I really don't understand his argument. If anything, his argument is strengthening the fact that he's not doing slave work. Because he's an Eved Hashem. Okay? So he's still being an Eved Hashem. So why does that give him a right to resign in the middle? He says, yes. So that shouldn't give him. I see. The argument that the Chavos Yoyer is making is that he's not doing any slavery at all, because that's v'ze'eno avdus Hashem Yisbarach. That's not enslavement to Hashem. If it was enslavement to Hashem, okay, it's a subtle point, but I'm not really sure I fully understand it. he says that if you're doing God's enslavement work, you're still called an Eved Hashem. And therefore you're not indentured to others, you're indentured to Hashem, but that, and then he says that gives you a right to resign. I don't really understand the argument. I think we're going to have to just move on. Asher al kain ein l'chayev es hamalamed lahamshich l'lamed b'talmud Torah hanal. But based on all of the above, we can't obligate a teacher to continue teaching in his post, even if he wishes to resign mid-year, with a caveat and with an asterisk that the Makor Baruch is very disturbed by this, because anytime someone is teaching for a communal entity, he's considered to be hired by the community, and this creates serious objections. So if a person is contemplating leaving his post, and he knows that he's going to be abandoning his students, and perhaps there won't be anyone to teach them, then that certainly should be objectionable. Even if we can't necessarily obligate him from a halachic standpoint, there should be a sense of responsibility that this teacher should have. If the teacher is simply going to another school and the students will follow him, then the only other issue that we said was disturbing to us is the financial investment that perhaps the school has made in order to support this teacher, which Rav Shraga apparently doesn't take into account. He still says it's permitted to do so.
And I would have thought that students who remain in the school because they can't afford to leave or move or whatever could be detrimentally affected by that.
Well, we got, from this, we got
Yeah.
the whole class went to the next school.
Yeah.
I'm just saying they paid their fees or whatever. Maybe it doesn't work that way. You think they paid their fees and now rich parents can take their kids elsewhere and the other kids are left without a teacher potentially.
Yeah, but the argument is that you can always find a replacement. He may not be as good,
Right.
but he'll still be adequate enough such that the children will still be educated.
I guess
Perhaps
I'll
not as
try
well,
to
but
listen to the pieces that I've missed, but none of this applies if the teacher is not teaching Torah or is not Jewish. Actually, if the teacher is not Jewish, it's a secular.
if it's a secular type of education, I think that there's less of a compelling argument to be made. First of all, there's two opposing issues. One is that there's no problem of enslavement for a non-Jew.
Right.
So when he commits himself contractually, so there's more of an argument to say that he's not allowed to resign. But on the other hand, he's not abandoning a post where children will not be learning Torah.
Right.
So
Plus
there's
his mind.
yeah.
So why do we call it enslavement if you have a compensation, a payment? So
Yes, that's a good question. He is being compensated, but at the same time, not allowing a person to be freed from that is still considered a form of enslavement. In other words, even if I pay you, but I don't give you the opportunity to leave, in a sense, you still are a slave.
so marriage could be like enslavement?
I have to warn you, Mordecai, this is being recorded.
I know. You don't have to answer. You can take it offline.
Okay, the next so we'll go on to the next Shiva. I'm probably going to try and look up this Chavos Yar when I have some time to try and make sense of it, because and the Choshen going back and forth, I don't really understand their back and forth. Okay, Shuvas mi Beis Hadin. So now we get into some real life shuvas that come from the Beis Din. Chiyuv arevut bekesef shenignav megemach. And I think we saw a little bit of this in the Baruch Sha'amar. Okay, there was money that was stolen from a gemach, from a charity fund, and a person had committed himself to act as a guarantor. Yeah, a guarantor for the gemach. Yeah. Now, Tess, she's just calling him Tess, just to retain his anonymity. Okay. Haya mi'unyan la'asot iska imar Zayin. He was interested in doing business with Mr. Zion. Avolo haya mi'unyan lahashkia kesef etzlo b'li lekabel bitchonot. But he was only prepared to invest money if he received some sort of guarantees. Lachein Mar Zayin nasan lo bitachon b'ksafim shelo hamufkadim b'gemach shel harav Nun. And therefore, Mr. Zion provided him with a guarantee that I have my own money, meaning that if there anything goes wrong with the business, I will make you whole with the money, but that money is tied up in a gemach that belongs to Rabbi Nun. Okay, so panates laharav Nun levarer ta'inyan. So Tess, the investor, goes over to Rabbi Nun to verify that indeed Mr. Zion has a significant amount of money resting in the gemach. V'hala isher sha'achen yesh biyado ksafim shel Zion. And the rabbi verified, yes, I'm holding on to Mr. Zion's money. V'nasan lo shtar hafkada al sach 300,000 shekels al shem tet. And the Rabbi Nun showed him a piece of paper that represented that Mr. V'nasan lo shtar hafkada al sach 300,000 shekels al shem tet, ubo nichtav hareini la'asher bezeh, ki martet hifkid sach 300,000 shekels begamach al chov hapikadon shel Zion. Okay, so basically, the rabbi gives him a shtar that says that Mr. Tess invested 300,000 shekels into the gemach based on the guarantees of Mr. Zion. Ulata'anato shel tet Ivtiach lo harav Nun ki zeh bitachon mushlam. And according to Mr. Tetz's complaint or claim, Rav Nun promised him that there was enough money to cover that Mr. Zion had left in the community fund to cover that 300,000 shekel investment. Kechalov shnatayim asatet in Zion iska nosefet besach 330,000 shekel chadash. So after 2 years, Tess invests an additional 330,000 shekels. V'lo hiskim latet lo et hakesef lelo bitachon mushlam. But in this case, he did not demand some kind of security on the investment. V'zayin natan lo bitachon check shel hagamach. And v'lo hiskim latet lo et hakesef lelo bitachon mushlam. He did not agree to give him this second investment amount without a guarantee. In other words, there was no, it sounds like there was no express statement at all. It's not like he said with the second investment, it's okay, I don't need a guarantee. V'zayin natan lo bitachon check shel hagamach. Mr. Zion gave him a check from the gemach to demonstrate that he was guaranteeing this money. Ulatanato shel tet amar lo harav Nun shechek ze adif mishtar hafkada kevin shehu nitan lemeshicha miyadit. And according to Rav Nun, this check that was from the account of the gemach is even more of a strong financial instrument because it could be cashed in the bank at any time. Whereas when you have simply that piece of paper that Rabbi Nun issues, you'd have to give him a month's notice in order to be able to collect the cash. And based on that check, Mr. Tet invested the additional 330,000 shekels. La'achar zman, kasher ba Tet lekabel et kaspo mehagemach. So apparently, this gemach, this community fund, which is managed by this rabbi, I guess it's used to give out loans to people, but it's a slush fund, so it has a bunch of money in it. And so there's sufficient money that is invested in this gemach by Mr. Zion, such that Mr. Tess feels confident that his money is guaranteed. So Mr. Tess comes to get his money back from the gemach. Nodalo ki hayu mufkadim biyidei Mar Zion, shuhu baal change, shekim pituchim shel hagemach. So this is getting more and more complicated. So after a certain amount of time, Mr. Tess wants to get his money back. He discovers that Mr. Zion, who owns a money-changing business, has open checks that belong to the gemach. Va'amar lo harav Nun shuhu bal hagemach. And Rabbi Nun said that he is the head of the gemach. Shezayin mile check al sach godol, v'rokein et kaspei hagemach, v'lachein ein lagemach mima l'shalim lo. That Zion had filled mile check al sach godol. He has fulfilled the check for a very substantial amount. He's emptied out to the entire gemach, and the gemach therefore doesn't have any money. In other words, apparently Mr. Zion wrote or was able to receive a check from the gemach for a very, very large sum, and that has emptied out the gemach, and therefore the gemach doesn't have any money left to pay Mr. Tess what is owed to him. L'u'umat zeh, to'ein tet shahita pshi al yidei hagemach, shemasru chekim petuchim l'Zion. But on the other hand, Mr. Tess is claiming that the gemach was negligent by giving open checks to Mr. Zion, knowing that they had other debts that they had to fulfill. L'u'umat zeh to'en hagemach shemakubel ba'olam ha'asakim latei chekim petuchim la'change. And the gemach claims that this is standard practice. Hatovea higish sikumim b'tarich Yud Daled Menachem Av Tavshin Zayin, v'nitein psak din b'Yud Beis Elul Tavshin Zayin, bo chiev Beis Hadin haSagamach l'shalom et kol hasach shel 630 shekels, keven shagamach nasa arev kablim l'chov zeh v'al hagamach l'shalom tovei asach zeh. The Beis Din paskind. Wow, this is really a very interesting tshuva. Let me just see where this goes. Wow.
So the gemach, when they give this kind of loans, they also give guarantors. They don't just give the check. Even if it's a gemach, they need guarantors for the people who is asking for the money. So
Yeah.
it has to be like a way to secure the.
So I'm not sure I understand the structure of this gemach and how it's set up.
So one of the people in this situation was a money changer, right? So they had checks from the gemach that were of significant value, but it's hard to understand as to whether they were checks that were paid to the gemach or he had outstanding checks to withdraw.
He had checks that he could use to withdraw from the gemach. And apparently, I guess what it is that
Maybe he bought this from people.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's hard to know whether the people had paid him with the check.
Yes.
And
That
so he was just collecting.
But apparently the Beis Din had paskind that the gemach had become a guarantor. to Mr. Tet. Because it was Mr. Tet made it clear that he was only prepared to invest with Mr. Zion if the Gemach would back it up.
But we have two instruments. First, we have the document, and the other one is a check. So it should be a difference between both of them. But one is just a document that guarantees the money, and the one is the other 330 is it's a check. So they're responsible for the full amount for the 630 or just partial for it.
Okay, I'm gonna have to do a little bit more homework on this. Because I have to see whether this is, I want to look further into the Sefer and see if this is the format. If this is the format, it's going to become a little bit too technical for us to do on a daily basis. So let me look a little bit more into this and see how the Sefer continues. And then we'll try to pick this up tomorrow. Okay. All right. So we'll hold it here.
Good. Thank you.
All right. Have a good day.